The history of Roman Spain begins in the flames of the Second Punic War, a struggle between Rome and Carthage for dominance in the Western Mediterranean. Though the Carthaginians lost the First Punic War and forfeited some key territories, they were far from defeated. They chose the Iberian Peninsula as a new resource and economic base from which to continue the fight. The wealth of Iberia's silver mines enabled Carthage to maintain a large force of mercenaries who formed the backbone of its army. The Romans, of course, understood how vital Iberia was to Carthage and acted swiftly to curtail its expansion by forging alliances with some of the local tribes. It was the attack on Saguntum, a city allied with Rome, that triggered the outbreak of the Second Punic War. And it was on the Iberian front that the outcome of the war would ultimately be decided. Despite Hannibal's audacious and devastating strike, marching through the Alps deep into enemy territory, his campaign was not viewed in Carthage as the decisive move in the war. Over the 15 years he spent in Italy, Hannibal received reinforcements from his homeland only once. Carthage concentrated its main forces in Iberia, determined to hold it at any cost, fully aware that without it, the war would be lost. So, despite Hannibal's successful invasion of Italy, the Romans, just as planned, dispatched their forces to Iberia that same year, 218 BCE. Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio, the uncle of Hannibal's future conqueror, Scipio Africanus, landed at the city of Emporion on the coast of what is now Catalonia with 2 legions. He was soon joined by his brother, the former consul Publius Cornelius Scipio, who had already suffered a defeat at Hannibal's hands. The brothers quickly secured a foothold on the Iberian coast and launched military operations against the Carthaginians, who were led by Hannibal's brothers, Hasdrubal and Mago. The Romans first captured Tarraco, which became their main base and later the principal city of the entire peninsula. They then carried out a successful raid on allied Saguntum, after which many local tribes switched allegiance to Rome. Hasdrubal's fleet, which had attempted to block the transfer of Roman troops from Italy, was also defeated. Then, in 215 BCE, Hasdrubal himself was beaten on land.
Let us honor Rome's legacy, subscribe and stand with valorous history.
In a battle on the banks of the Ebro River, he employed the same tactics Hannibal had used at Cannae, but this time the Romans managed to break through the center of the Carthaginian army. Overall, the conquest of Iberia was going better than expected, and the Romans began to believe in victory too soon. In 211 BCE, Carthage succeeded in winning over the Iberian tribes, and with their help, delivered a powerful counterstrike. Both Scipios fell in battle, and the Romans were driven back across the Ebro. Meanwhile, the Roman forces in Italy recovered from their defeats and began pushing Hannibal southward down the Apennine Peninsula. With troops now freed up, Rome once again dispatched them to Iberia, this time under the command of Scipio Africanus. It was only with the arrival of this exceptional general that the tide of the war finally began to turn. In 209 BCE, Scipio advanced rapidly far to the south and launched a surprise attack on the enemy's principal city in Iberia, New Carthage. Hasdrubal failed to reach the city in time to assist, and was then defeated by Scipio in a decisive battle. After that, with the remnants of his army, he marched northward intending to join forces with Hannibal, but was killed in combat upon entering Italy. The final act of the Iberian campaign was the capture of the city of Gades. The fighting then shifted to North Africa, where Scipio defeated Hannibal himself and earned the title Africanus. Thus ended the Second Punic War. All of Carthage's territories on the Iberian Peninsula now passed under Roman control, but only in theory. In practice, Rome still had to wrest most of Iberia from the hands of the native peoples. The Celtiberian tribes in the central and northern regions remained independent, as did the Lusitanians inhabiting what is now Portugal. In 197 BCE, the territories under Roman control were divided into 2 provinces, Hispania Superior and Hispania Ulterior, each governed by a praetor whose term lasted 1 year. By that time, however, Rome's holdings on the peninsula were already engulfed in rebellion. It soon became necessary for consul Marcus Porcius Cato, the very one who famously declared Carthage must be destroyed, to come to the aid of the praetors. Together, they managed to suppress the uprising, and Cato even celebrated a triumph in its aftermath. But no sooner had he returned to Rome than the revolt flared up once again. The situation was dire. The Romans were merely trying to hold on to what they already possessed. Any talk of campaigns into the interior of the peninsula was out of the question for the time being. Peace came to Hispania Superior only in 179 BCE, following a Roman victory in the First Celtiberian War. As for Hispania Ulterior, events there followed a similar trajectory, only under even harsher conditions for the Romans. The Lusitanian uprisings escalated into a brutal war in which Roman generals consistently failed to defeat the enemy's main forces. When battles turned against them, the Lusitanians would retreat swiftly, often luring their pursuers into traps. Rome called in reinforcements from Hispania Superior and eventually launched a treacherous attack on the Lusitanians after signing a peace treaty with them. But even that failed to break their resistance, and they continued their guerrilla campaign. The Romans managed to eliminate the rebel leader Viriathus by bribing those closest to him. Meanwhile, the Second Celtiberian War had already run its course, and no sooner had the Lusitanian War ended than the Third Celtiberian, or Numantine, War broke out. The final symbol of large-scale local resistance to Roman conquest was the city of Numantia, whose inhabitants chose mass suicide over surrender to the enemy. With the end of the Celtiberian Wars came a period of peaceful consolidation. Some peoples, including the Lusitanians, periodically rose in rebellion, but nothing could now prevent the Romans from fully conquering the peninsula. In the more developed regions along the southern and eastern coasts, the Roman way of life became fairly widespread. A significant portion of the local population adopted Roman names. At the same time, the Greek and Phoenician colonies, owing to their advanced cultures, remained largely resistant to Romanization. The same was true of the native inhabitants of the mountainous areas in the central regions, though in their case, it was due to their isolation from major urban centers. The civil wars of the Roman Republic that ultimately transformed it into an empire deeply affected Spain as well. When war broke out in 83 BCE between the supporters of Sulla and Gaius Marius, Quintus Sertorius, a follower of the latter, gained control in Spain. Although Sulla's forces initially drove him out, he managed to return a year later with the support of the newly rebellious Lusitanians. Sertorius resolved to turn his territories into an independent state in direct opposition to Sulla's Rome. He established a senate modeled on the Roman one, appointed praetors and quaestors, and even forged an alliance with Mithridates Sixtior Eupator, the king of Pontus and a long-standing enemy of Rome. His capital was based in the city of Osca. Among the local population, Sertorius enjoyed great popularity thanks to his personal bravery and lenient treatment of the native peoples. Until 75 BCE, he managed to fend off all the forces sent against him. Rome even feared a renewed incursion from Spain across the Alps, sparing no expense in the campaign to defeat Sertorius. The war effort was led by the young and ambitious Gnaeus Pompey, for whom this was a prime opportunity to make a name for himself. In some battles, Sertorius even managed to defeat Pompey, but the protracted war drained his state's resources, and a conspiracy soon emerged among his closest officers. This time, the Romans did not even need to resort to bribery. After Sertorius was assassinated, Pompey easily overcame the disunited rebels. Despite its destructive nature, the war marked another stage in the Romanization of the peninsula. By taking part in the civil war, the Iberians were drawn, one way or another, into the life of the future empire, while Roman generals granted citizenship en masse to the local inhabitants as a reward. Over the course of his meteoric career, Julius Caesar served as governor, or propraetor, of Hispania Ulterior, where, with his characteristic energy, he crushed the remaining pockets of resistance. And with the outbreak of a new civil war, he once again set off for Spain to neutralize Pompey's supporters. It was there that the final battle of this war took place, in which Caesar defeated the son of his old rival, Gnaeus Pompey the Younger. Finally, under Augustus, 200 years after Scipio's landing on the peninsula, the last independent Iberian territories in the north were subdued, ushering in a long era of peace and prosperity across the entire region. A vital component of Spain's economic development was the network of roads connecting the provinces to the capital. The most famous of these was the Via Augusta, It was wide enough to allow two carts to pass each other with ease. Branching off from this main trade artery were smaller regional roads. New towns sprang up and old ones grew and expanded at the main transfer points along this network. The largest of these were Cordoba, Tarraco, and New Carthage, each home to between 20 and 30,000 residents. Like other cities, they saw the construction of amphitheaters, the erection of forums, and the laying of aqueducts. Among them, the monumental aqueduct in Segovia stands out for its remarkable state of preservation. In the 27th year BCE, an administrative reform was carried out that divided Rome's Iberian holdings into regions more manageable for governance. The provinces of Lusitania, Hispania Tarraconensis, and Baetica were established. The latter became a major producer of olive oil and the famous ancient Roman sauce garum, made through the fermentation of fish. During the reign of Augustus, the population of Spain is estimated to have been between 5 and 6 million. Veterans of numerous wars were settled on the peninsula. A colony named Augusta Emerita, present-day Merida, was founded specifically for them. It preserves more Roman monuments than any other city in Spain. Under Emperor Vespasian, Latin citizenship was granted to all inhabitants of Spain, though Roman citizenship would not be extended to them until the year 212 by the Edict of Caracalla. The military presence in the region, due to its remoteness from dangerous borders, was sparse. The only legion stationed across all three provinces, the 7th Gemina, was quartered in the city of Leon, whose name derives from the word legion. Among the prominent figures of culture, the philosopher Seneca stands out, mentor and tutor to Emperor Nero. And of course, Spain is renowned as the homeland of the great Roman emperors Trajan and Hadrian. Both were born in Italica, a city founded by Scipio Africanus for his soldiers. Under their reigns, Romanization reached its peak, gradually penetrating even the most remote corners of the northern regions. At the same time, Christianity had already made its way to the peninsula during the first century of its existence. According to tradition, the apostles James and Paul visited Spain. The remains of Saint James are still preserved in the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, which is the final destination of the main pilgrimage route in Europe. During the crisis of the 3rd century, Spain remained a relatively calm region. With only a small number of soldiers stationed there, the troops in Spain did not proclaim their own emperor, as the legions in many other provinces had done. Nevertheless, the crisis did have an impact on the peninsula's economic situation. The overall weakening of the empire's military power, plagued as it was by ongoing civil wars, also led to Germanic tribes reaching Spain. This was the first such incursion since the invasion of the Cimbri and Teutons way back in the 2nd century BCE. After breaking through the Rhine frontier, the Franks and Alemanni pushed south through Gaul and sacked Tarraco. This was a kind of foreshadowing of the massive invasion by the Suebi, Alans, and Vandals in the 5th century, when Spain became one of the first provinces to break away completely from the collapsing Western Roman Empire. These tribes were later driven out of the peninsula by the Visigoths, who founded their own kingdom there.
For Rome's glory, subscribe now and join our legion. Let your voice shape history.